Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
And before we dive off into our vastly knowledgeable depths of fields of experience and knowledge, we were going to try something a little different with our analytics point of view because we're having a terrible feedback right now. If you guys ever have any questions, concerns, comments, theories, conjectures, interjections, or concerns, please email us at ittasteslikeburningcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to follow us or subscribe. Am I forgetting anything?
Reviews. If you like what you hear or don't like what you hear, whatever, just leave us a review on your favorite podcast player, and we'd appreciate it.
It does help. You'd be surprised.
It does help. And without any further ado, we've got a couple guests today that we were in Equestrian Monthly.
Weekly.
That's
I was
a
reading
weekly
that.
publication. Yeah.
And I saw two help wanted ads and just happened to recognize the names attached to them. I'd like to go ahead and introduce Allan and Bailey. So, Allan, go ahead and give us a little bit about yourself. Primarily interested in Equestrian Weekly.
I've been around for 5 years. That's how long I've been on the department. And
I thought you meant you were 5 years old. I'm sorry.
a little too tall for that. But I've been in the area for 20 plus years, worked in all forms of public service and military, and now I'm chasing a dream that I'm not very fond of from some individuals in this service.
And we will hammer you shortly on that, but we're going to get to Bailey. Bailey, tell us just a little bit about yourself.
So I actually joined the department when I was in high school. I joined as a cadet at 17 and stayed with the department until I got voted on as an active member during the high school year. Senior year, I was in a EMT school. Took that class, ended up passing, and now I'm an emergency medical technician. And now currently enrolled in Fire Academy. I'm almost done with that. Got about a 2-week hands-on skill portion in Crowley. And almost done with that. So once I get that done, I plan on going to somewhere up in the Metroplex to be on a paid department.
Okay. Now, Allan, how old are you now?
23.
And when did you join?
2017.
Okay. And Bailey?
22 now, and I joined the department as a cadet at 17.
Okay. Yeah, that's just, I'm mentioning that because one thing that we talk about is that, and that's part of the reason I have you guys here tonight, is we look at ourselves, we cherish young men and women on the department. It's fantastic for us because we get to squeeze every single ounce of effort out of you for free and completely manipulate and use you for our own undue process. Meanwhile, the trade-off is that we can, one, give you some career advice and experience, hands-on skills, all that crap. Certificates, training, on and on. But also, it's a stepping stone for you, resume builders, because our organization has the benefit of being known. And there is value in being able to put us down on a resume, except for Allan. Why is that, Allan?
I'm going to be a cop.
Terrible mistake. Why?
So my thought process with this
It's wrong.
I've been getting that for 5 years too. So my thought process is you can be a volunteer in the fire service and a paid cop, but you can't be a volunteer cop and a paid firefighter. And I love doing best of both worlds. Public service is what I've been chasing since I was 17 years old. So it gives me the opportunity to be able to do both. And then another goal is to be able to bridge a gap in our local area between the law enforcement and the fire department.
Now, what's specifically about law enforcement that is appealing to you?
Honestly, I don't want to sound cliche, but it's the simple fact that it's like the fire department and there's guns.
Yeah, that's.
I'm not adamantly opposed to you just having a gun here, but I mean, do they teach you to be a jerk in the first semester or the second semester? When does that indoctrination occur in the academy over there?
I feel like that it's not in the academy. The academy teaches you how to just be able to write your name officially on a piece of paper. You learn how to that side of the job when it comes to whoever you decide to work for.
So you've just been dreaming of being a dick since you were a kid. Okay, all seriousness. What sort of law enforcement are you looking to go into? Is it local, state, federal, water, pigeon, what?
Well, being on the department here, I've gotten a lot of experience in swiftwater, and then also I was in the Navy, so obviously you're on the water. So my ultimate goal is maritime enforcement of some sort, drug interdiction, something. But
Okay.
I also, or as well as like dive rescue, water rescue, stuff like that. So that's what I'm chasing for the ultimate goal, and then that's where I'm choosing where I want to go based on if they offer those opportunities.
So just dumb question. You're still in the Navy, right?
Yep.
You're a reservist, right?
Yes, sir.
So at the end of your contract, why don't you slide over and become a coastie?
I might do that, but
I mean,
we all know the reasons why I can't leave the area.
Well, yeah.
So I can't go active. I'll just be a reservist, and then I'll be doing the same thing I'm doing.
Yeah. I mean, there's coasties in South Texas. There's coasties all
But
over.
I also want to be a part of the military, and Coast Guard's kind of a, the stepchild, redhead stepchild.
And you can send your hate mail.
So you can just go ahead and any of that hate mail from the Coast Guard perspective over there, we'll put in the description as Allan's personal cell phone number.
Yeah.
So you can just go ahead and text him all day and all night and tell him what kind of terrible life decisions and misguided judgment he has.
Because because at It Tastes Like Burning, we love the Coast Guard a lot.
I never said the Coast Guard was bad, but if the Coast Guard wants to be U.S. military, they best step up their game.
I guess, technically, the Coast Guard's actually, from what I understand, not in the main branches of service anymore, right? They're
not.
under
They're Homeland
Security.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
But there's still 5 branches because there's Space Force now, right?
That's
Don't
right.
even get me started on that one.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah,
can assure
I
you, you'll
think
never
we
be
need
able
to
to
not
see a
let you-
rocket ship, much less lick one. So,
Yeah, no. Unless they have you guarding that after you flunk out of police academy.
Hey,
Hey.
I don't need that negativity in my life.
so with law enforcement, I mean, there's 500 different ways to go with it. Are you going to be hell-bent on trying to do one particular course of action, or are you going to try and go with the flow, for lack of better words?
Well, like I said, I'm going to chase the maritime side, but also I know for a fact I don't want to work for a city. So most likely state or county is my next best option. And then it comes to the agency. Let's say I worked local, there's very few opportunities for me to chase. But if I went state, I have every opportunity under the sun to chase.
So in your perspective, what's the difference? What's in being so finite what's not appealing about a city versus a county or state agency's fine?
So if I were to reference locally, it would be call volume and call type. Call volume locally is not there. It's fairly small. I bet Bailey can attest to that too, compared to the county side. And then now if I wanted to move and go up to a city or the Metroplex, there's a lot more opportunity in cities and the pay is pretty good, and the call volume's there, but it's a lot different call volume. It's a lot more, like a better word, dangerous, even though the whole job itself is dangerous, but it's just the city life isn't for me. I hate driving in downtown. And if I worked in a city, that's all I'd be doing.
Okay.
Stop sign is stop sign, not what I want. I want to be able to just run down the highway and do my thing.
Now I'm going to segue over to Bailey here. You originally had the same terrible mindset as Allan here. Because if I remember correctly, you were law enforcement centered, bound, whatever. So what kind of made you realize that maybe law enforcement's not for me, but I want to go to a more realistic, better, much more pleasant public experience?
So I applied at one department and made it to the interview process. And after the interview process, I didn't get it, but that kind of brought me down, I'll be honest. And then from there, I realized that, fire and EMS side together, I would prefer that. And it's something I enjoy mostly. Just I enjoy the different types of calls that you may come up to. Like, just it's what I prefer, I guess.
That's fine. I mean, like I said, it's fluid. I mean, at the end of the day, both of you are so dang young that it really doesn't matter. I think that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that people make from an advice point of view is that, and I'm all about, if you have a true interest in something, pursue it, but don't be so excluding that when you realize early, particularly early, like this isn't for me. For the love of God, make the change, find something else. Don't force yourself to continue to go down that path, because you're not necessarily going to just change, in this case, agencies, and make it all better. Because truly, at the end of the day, I mean, other than maybe Division of Wildlife, you're not going to have that big of a change going from, and I'm going to go extreme opposites here, being a small town cop to a state trooper. It's still, you're in the same area, it's the same people, it's the same problems, and you're going to have a lot of the sameness. It's just going to be a completely larger platform that you're going to be working off of. And if it's not appealing to you at a very small agency point of view, or even going exact opposite of that, going from gigantic to small, it's not going to get better. All you've done is just change the dinner plate and the sides a little bit. It's still the same law enforcement main course.
And really and truly, the only question you got to ask yourself is, do I want hemorrhoids from a car seat, or do I want to play video games in a lazy boy? Because that's the true difference right there, 100%.
Well, do you want to be a first responder or a second responder also?
You'd be a third responder over there being the cop. I mean, what are you going to shoot the fire out?
Hey, you go piss on
I
it.
shot all 7 of the survivors, sir. I did a good job.
We cornered them. They tried to escape. We pushed them back in. So in the long run, Allan, and I ask this not in a snarky way, when you find success locally, okay, because we don't have, in our town, there's no great blue ocean. There's really a dirty pond, so there's not going to be a ton of drug trafficking across our pond. Maybe the occasional frog or some dumbass that tries to water ski at night. True story. And so how do you plan on making that next quantum leap? Because if you're talking about actually going to the major leagues and doing pretty serious work on that end, how are you going to make that transition?
Well, there's a lot of options with that. Like I mentioned, maritime enforcement in general, rescue recovery, drug interdiction is just a big part of that. And then, like you mentioned, our small area, we don't have a lot of drug interdiction, but we do have the pond. And then there's also the opportunity I'm going to chase, hopefully, ultimately, get on the game warden side, fish and game, and they do their rotation. As far as I'm concerned, they do the drug interdiction stuff down on the river. Same with DPS. They have rotations down there. So if I were to chase that dream, I could still potentially live and work locally with the occasional out-of-town job of working the coast.
Okay, so
No. It doesn't happen like that.
It does.
No. You go spend 2 years on the coast, and then they send you to as far away from your home as they can send you. Because the Parks and Wildlife doesn't want you to be where you're from.
Well, that's Parks
a
and
given.
Wildlife. DPS is different.
DPS is different. Parks and Wildlife wants you as far away from your home as you can be because of the the nature of what that job is, they don't want you to
Have friends.
have friends and family, basically, wherever you're sent. I've got several good friends that are either retired or current Parks and Wildlife officers, and that's what they do. That's it. Like they go, if they live in East Texas, they get sent to West Texas, and vice versa. Like you go from Tyler to Marfa. That's the trip you make.
But you get a free truck.
You do get a free truck.
And a boat.
A bat boat. Yeah. It's all the guys I know that do that job, really awesome dudes. And they really, really love wildlife and like their hearts are in the right place for what they're doing. But it's an interesting deal the way Parks and Wildlife places people where they place them. It's truly to get you away from your friends and family.
And that's one of the hardest jobs to get in the state.
Really kind of interesting how they do that.
I don't know anything about being a duck cop.
It's possum sheriff.
Possum sheriff, even
Yeah.
better than mine. Now, one thing I do want to ask both of you about, we do have a handful of, guys and gals that are approximately your age. Same concept is that you have young people that are looking to make a career, public service regardless. And I know both of you have interview experience, and I know both of you have had very different interview experiences. So, Bailey, in the experiences that you've had, what advice would you give to a young person who's going into their very first interview? Now that you've had that, what would be your advice?
So I would definitely do some review. I'll be honest, I didn't do a whole lot of review. I figured I would go to my first interview and just kind of give it a shot and then kind of learn from there and move forward. But I would definitely say do a lot more review before you actually do the interview.
Review of what?
Just go over some possible interview questions they'd ask you. That would probably be the biggest thing.
So like some prep, interview prep. And we've talked about that a lot in the past with other guests, and there's definitely a lot of advantage to doing that. And we've even talked about how this conversation and this podcast serves as some interview prep for you guys, because it's sitting down and having a conversation and feeling more natural about having a conversation and not sitting there like a dog pooping a peach seed shaking in your boots.
Yeah, it's you don't really think of an interview as like a life skill, but interviewing is a lot like public speaking. Even if you're a natural public speaker, if you get remotely derailed, it can really throw people for a loop, and you'll see them run into the proverbial concrete wall, and it hammers them. And interviews are intentionally that way. It's public speaking, but at least this time it's important to you, and they're going to ask you stuff that you don't necessarily remotely have an idea of the questions they're going to pop off with, but at least it's always followed up with if you screw up. Now you've proverbially hung yourself, and they're going to continue to just beat you to death over it. And it is, interview prep is really a developed skill. It's not, I'll even go as far as to say that it doesn't matter how much prep you've done. If you are terrible at interviews, the personality, demeanor, on and on. And we're talking basic things. Can't maintain eye contact. You just come across as just the strangest, weirdest, most uncontrolled person on the face of the earth. Yeah, you might be able to recite those questions, but your body language is a disaster. That type of stuff will just eat you alive. And again, the only way you're going to get through it is to literally go to interviews and get your teeth kicked in. The only benefit that truly comes off of an interview, and I wish more people and organizations, companies, whatever, would do this and actually give it a very simple debrief after the interview. And it's not a kumbaya moment. It is to literally pull out the proverbial bat and tee off on you and tell you the good, the bad. You don't need to know about the good. That's simple. You did this. Boom, boom, boom. That's good. Here's the bad. Because again, if you don't have someone tell you the mistakes you're making, then how do you know to actually correct it unless you go through more interviews, and then having ultimately the ability to have someone give you some sort of feedback. So how about you, Allan? What about your interview prep advice you'd give to a new recruit?
So whether you're going law or fire, a big one that I was told when I was preparing, as well as what I witnessed when I was doing interviews, is know the agency or department you want to work for. When I say that, I don't mean like know the people. I'm talking about know the agency, know the mission statement, their code of ethics, their 10 commandments, whatever you want to call it. Know what that agency is like, their response area, their response district, how they respond. Know the agency so when they can ask you, oh, how many square miles is it the city? Boom, 6.5 square miles. And you know that stuff. Or like try to learn the ethics. Like I said, they're going to ask you, what trustworthiness mean to you? Teach yourself. Or what would you say? Or they'll ask you questions like, what's a trait that you think you need to work on? Learn one, know one, and just recite that one. And don't change it interview to interview. Stick with the same one the whole time. Also, I would say walk into the interviews like confidently, like you own the place. Because like you mentioned, your body language will speak a lot over what they say about you and what they think about you. And if you walk in there scared out of your shorts, quivering, they're going to be like, well, this guy's not going to be able to handle the job on the street or the fire on scene. But if you walk in there ready to go, then that is a lot. It's pretty much half the interview, like Matt said, is just how they see you, not even what you say. And then use your common respects. Yes, sir, no, sir. Don't be like, yeah, kind of stuff.
I think one thing that gets really common forgotten, particularly on the public service side, and this is directly related to the interviews, is particularly in public service, fire, EMS, police, military. There's a handful of other careers that have this. Medical, nurses, doctors. You work a ton. And when you work, you're with the same people a ton. And you end up over the course of your career spending exponentially more time with the people you work with than your spouse or your kids. And that gets negated, forgotten. And one of the biggest pieces of career advice I can ever give anyone is, does it really pass the initial, I'm going to call it the smell test, but we'll just call it the first glance. Can I spend a colossal amount of time with this person? Are they funny? Can they be accurate and articulate when I need them to be? Other really nonchalant things that turn out to be really important. Can they cook? These are things, because you spend so much time with these people. Well, sorry for the weird interruption, but we had to stop and go do Kegel exercises for about 3 hours.
We're good at it now.
It's hot in Texas, and this is our second structure fire today. It's not awesome. So we were talking about how awesome firefighters are and how cops try and be awesome. And the people that want to be cops, I guess they're okay.
A little bit.
So we were talking about interviews. That's right. We were talking about interviews.
Yep.
And I think we had Allan that was talking about doing interview recommendations for interview prep. So do you have anything else you recommend for interview prep?
I believe the last thing I said was know your agency and be confident. And that's the two biggest ones that I would recommend for a younger individual and an older individual going into a new position in the public service realm.
Do you see any parallel between the fire service and law enforcement?
Well, there's obviously the fire marshal side, and for that you have to be peace officer. So that's the biggest connection, I would say. But then it's also just working together, because when you get into very not happy situations, big incidences, you have to work with your law enforcement counterparts, and there needs to be a connection. There needs to be communication, and that's something that needs to be fixed because it's not there in a lot of places.
Do you think that's a organization problem, agency problem, or do you just think it's a fact that firefighters and cops generally don't get along?
I wouldn't say they don't get along. I mean, I feel like there's a couple cops we tolerate around here. But the big one would be it starts from the top, from the tone out or the call being given to the officer. And if it happens to be the same call, the communication between the officer, dispatch, and fire, either officer and fire need to talk to each other, or dispatch needs to do what they need to do and make sure they communicate the information to both parties.
What about you, Bailey? Because you have a pretty unique perspective in all this, because where do you currently work right now?
I work at the sheriff's office, and I'm actually a dispatcher. September will be 4 years there. So
Okay. So you have a pretty unique insight to all of this. What do you think and I say this, I make it sound like that we're at war. We're not at war, but there's always a communication breakdown between law enforcement and fire. And particularly for us, it's because we have literally no way to talk to each other on a radio. So it makes it hard to have even basic communication in any given scene unless you're directly standing there with them or calling dispatch.
Well, we use hand signals at each other.
Or throw stuff.
Yeah.
That works. So what's your perspective on that whole communication between fire and law enforcement?
communication, like in general, or like
Yeah, we'll just say in general.
I'm kind of divert. Honestly, back then I think the rivalry between the fire department and police, it was kind of bad. But I'd say it's gone a lot better. Communication wise, if we're on scene or whatever, we got a little bit of break. I'll go out, talk to them, kind of build some camaraderie and try to get familiar with them, talk to them. I think it's gotten a lot better, like communication.
Yeah, that's kind of, you went to where ultimately I was going to go with this, is that if you have an organization and, it's two forms of public service and they're generally not getting along, just talk.
Yeah.
We have the benefit of being in Texas. It's 1 trillion degrees. We get to take our bunker gear off, go lay under the shade, have a whole bunch of cold water. Cops usually don't get that. They get to get in their cruiser, but if they're working a car accident scene and they're on the blacktop, they're in their body armor, they're in dark uniforms, and, simple bottle of water can go a long ways.
A big thing, too, I would say, is a lot of officers in our area don't have any clue about fire service. So it comes down to strictly vehicle placement on a scene.
Sure, and that's vice versa. Mm-hmm. We show up on particularly a car accident. Realistically, for us, we don't care if it's a DUI, quadruple murder. That's all's we're there is to see if we can go put the red stuff back in the person and make it all better. And we don't really care if we drive right through their scene or take all of their evidence and kick it all over the place. And, those are things that are real important to those guys, the men and women on law enforcement, because my God, are we screwing up their scene if we, and there is, don't get me wrong, I understand life safety and life-saving actions, but there is a happy medium there. You don't have to completely do a full extrication on the vehicle to then drag every piece of evidence that they have, across the parking lot and then light it on fire for them. Little things that we can do.
There'll be things like that. And like I said, or mentioned earlier, I'm not sure if we were recording or not. The goal that I have is if I'm in a local agency, I could be a liaison between both parties to the other party and hopefully maybe be able to solve some of those issues that we are coming across when it comes to vehicle placement on a fire or fire messing up evidence on a DUI manslaughter case.
I mean, one of the bigger things, and I'll turn it over to you here in a second, Jesse, is you show up on scene, check out the patient. It's a fatality. Okay, we automatically know at that point it's a bad call. Okay, that's a perfect opportunity to tell everyone to step away, go up to the police, and tell them we're going to stay completely out of your way, and if you need anything, let us know. Till then, we're not going to touch anything else until you tell us to go up there. That can go a long ways for them too.
On the communications thing that you asked earlier too, me being on the department too and working, at a sheriff's office agency, I feel I've also helped them out to give them a better understanding of why we do things, and then it clicks in their head and they're like, oh, okay. So I think, being part of the sheriff's office and the fire department too, that kind of helps out with the communication and gives them a better understanding of, why the things we do are done in a certain way, I guess you could say.
I think at the end of the day, I think one of the bigger problems that any volunteer organization is going to have when they're working counterpart to a law enforcement, that's always career. Career firefighters and volleys, they aren't necessarily the most copacetic group. And, it really comes down to that professionalism. And I think on the law enforcement side, it's the same thing. Where at the end of the day, the volunteers are basically a Labrador in a party hat. And it's like, oh, look at you, you're cute. And you pet them on the head, they wag their tail a little bit. And, for us, that's always going to be an uphill battle, because there's no way ever for law enforcement to truly be able to have a reference point to gauge the interactions between the organizations, where our organization on the paid side is known on the paid side. So we get at least a modicum of street credit off of that. And that actually helps in the long run with the total aggregate of all the volunteers versus all the career departments. And somehow or another, we've gotten, with a very other few departments, kind of got sifted into this middle gray area where it's like, oh, you're volunteer? Oh, but you're that organization? And they're like, okay. So you get just this sliverest amount of credit for it. Whereas on law enforcement, frankly, you're just not going to get that. Jesse?
No, I mean, I've seen the same things everywhere. It's not just here, and it's not just that a lot of it boils down to just not a true understanding, because the two jobs are so different.
Right.
In what your end goals are and what your goals in general are, that one side doesn't understand the other side. And it's not unless you're very veteran and you've been around a long time, you have talked and visited and understand more of each other, does that even become a thing that mutual respect builds. It's tough, and some agencies are worse than others. I mean, definitely DPS is tougher to deal with than maybe a local agency and some of that stuff, because they just really don't care. And they don't care to learn what you're doing.
And then the only thing I would counter to that is DPS is even a better example, particularly rural DPS. They're going to see a bunch of different types of agencies, and it's the old adage of, one oh crap will undo 10,000 attaboys. And, it really only takes one bad experience with a department 14 counties away to get everyone immediately lumped into it, and you're doomed forever from that point moving forward, because you'll just never be given the opportunity to try and be a good example. They just frankly don't care.
I would say now some of the officers and deputies, they are more, like I said earlier, they're more like the rivalry, it's gone a lot better. And then some of them, they'll actually, like, a lot of them now will work with you. They'll, if it's like a couple days ago, we had a fire. There's 2 police officers there, and the first thing they said, "What do you need?"
Right.
And so, like I said, it's gotten a lot better. So now they're wanting to help, and then, like I said, too.
And also, it's not like the fire departments are innocent in this either.
Oh no, no.
That's I can think of a couple of stories with our guys that they're lucky they didn't get pistol whipped, and they arguably should have. And the only thing I can counter that with is law enforcement has to go to the administration of the department and tell them, hey, this not going to work. This can't happen again. This is why this person was wrong. So there is a little bit of that needs to happen. And again, at the end of the day, those relationships are also kind of cemented by the administration of any of the organizations. And if you have a chief that's just emphatically anti whatever, fire, EMS, PD, dispatch, doesn't matter. Yeah, the whole organization will be poisoned from the top down.
And the best thing to do is ask them if their wife left them for a firefighter.
Right.
Absolutely. Just do that every time.
What if she leaves you for another firefighter?
That's the only reason to actually hate a fireman, isn't it?
Well, there's this song. Kind of explains all of that. Well, I know everyone's starting to get pretty tired. We're going to have a little bit of a shorter podcast on this one. You guys are more than welcome to hopefully jump on again, and we have one that's a touch on the shorter or longer side, or at least normal. You guys have any parting statements?
Go forth and conquer. Do great things.
Always give 110% effort.
Even if you only have 10.
Yeah, I'm good with 95, and I'll go do mediocre things. It'll be fine.
Don't half-ass anything, whole-ass it?
Yeah, whole ass 2 things or something like that. Yeah.
All right, guys, if you've listened this far, thanks for listening. Again, click the follow or subscribe button. If you have time, give us a review. Throw some stars on there and contact us at ittasteslikeburningcast@gmail.com. This is Matt.
This is Jesse.
Allan.
Bailey.
Appreciate it, guys. Have a good evening.